What's up, buddy?
Yeah!
Yeah, is what's up.
Yeah!
That is what's up.
What's happening?
Oh, you know, a little exhausted.
You guys, do you remember a rough, 30 or so episodes ago when I had some life changes? Well, Spencer's got a life change of his own today.
There's a little tiny dog running around my house, and he's real confused.
There's a baby animal in the house.
He doesn't know where the fuck he is.
You guys, we officially have a What If studio dog. And now...
Welcome to the Dog Dads podcast.
Dog Dads.
Sponsored by Ghost Blog. Dad Dog's Ghost Blog.
That's like Bob...
Dog Dad's Ghost... Ah, shit.
Bob Loblaw's Law Blog. It's like...
Dad Dog sounds better, but it makes less sense.
Well, but people are going to call you a dog dad, though. It's going to happen.
Right, but I'm saying Dog Dad's Ghost Blog doesn't sound as good as Dad Dog Ghost Blog.
You're right. Also, Dog Dad is a dog who's also a dad. Dad Dog is a dad.
Yeah, he ain't that yet. He's only 8 weeks old.
Yeah.
He ain't got no balls.
I was just going to say, also, he snipped. So that ain't going to work no matter what. You're a puppy father.
Uh-huh.
How's that going?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you got to experience the first... Ryan showed up at my house, I don't know, maybe...
About an hour ago.
Well, right, but like 2 hours after my dog did.
Yes.
Yeah, so you got to experience some of his first moments as a confused young lad exploring my house.
Studio dog.
Yeah.
One day we're gonna have him so well trained that we're gonna get speak out of him.
Oh yeah,
so
nice.
He's gonna be napping on the floor, and we'll be like, I don't know, Marcy, what do you think? And then we'll be like, yeah, fuck yeah, dog. Tell him, and then he'll just go right back to sleep. He'll be sick.
Yeah.
Well, maybe on the Patreon we should do like we used to do. Is it trash? Well, we've continued to do. Is it trash?
We just did one last week.
We did do. Is it trash last week? Hey, on air production meeting. Should we make that a free one?
Oh, we haven't done that in a long time. Yeah, sure.
Listener Matt suggested it, and I think it'd be a fun thing to do. So for those of you...
forgot that we should be doing that.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, once in a, month or every, couple months or so, we'll make one of our Patreon episodes free to listen to. So you can get a vibe for what the Patreon's like. If you want to support the show, it's only $5 a month, and you get an extra episode every single week. So it's 8 episodes a month instead of 4 episodes a month. And it's only $5. So patreon.com/whatifpodcast will make this week's episode free for you guys, so you can go check it out.
Oh, dang.
But yeah, maybe we should add a new segment to the Patreon where it's you and I doing dog dad, like dog dad fill-ins. We'll
fill-ins?
Just like, hey, how's being a dog dad going?
Right.
You and I are in our very nascent stages of learning how to father.
Yeah, we got to come up
animals.
with a cool name for it though, like Dog Diaries or something.
Sounds way too close to dog diarrhea, and that's not something anybody wants.
Too close to what?
Dog diarrhea, and that's not something anybody wants.
Well, I mean, that happens.
Dad Dog Ghost Blog is still... Dad Dog's Ghost Blog is still pretty good, even if it doesn't make sense.
Dad Dog's Ghost Blog. Yeah. If it's Dad Dog's possessive, yeah.
Dad Dog's Ghost Blog.
Yeah, but it should be Dad's Dog, because we are plural.
Dad's is?
We are many. Dad's is, dogs is, ghosts is, blogs is...
Everyone is finding this surely unlistenable, and for that, I do not fault them.
This is your first time listening. I do not apologize.
Welcome back from California again. How was Cali this time?
It was all right.
Yeah?
Yeah, San Diego's a nice place.
It's a pretty town.
Yeah, it was rainy and shitty while we were there.
A little dumpy. Mm-hmm. Did you go to the zoo?
No. Did you know it costs $60 to go to that zoo? That's too much for a zoo.
$60 is like the nice price. I think on weekends it's like closer to 100.
Minimum 60. Yeah. Like weekday, like you don't get to see the cool shit price is $60.
to do it all on a weekend.
It's like $110 or something.
Yeah. I remember that from
obscene. Why would you do that?
It's too much. I
don't know why I decided to do this.
How many people have kids and like families and they're like, it sounds like a good thing to do today.
That's what I'm saying.
Spend $600 at the zoo.
Right. A family of 4, you're dropping almost $500 just to get in.
Right. Not to mention, you're going to eat lunch there and
or you had to get to San Diego.
Well, that, yes.
Or, even if you lived there, $500 to go to the zoo on the weekend? Crazy.
It's not cool.
Not what we're here for. We're talking about fucking UFOs.
Hey! Well, sort of. Phrasing.
We're talking about UFOs.
There we go.
Fucking A, right. We're talking about UFOs.
There we go. That'll do it. We're gonna jump into one of the. Would you agree this is one of the most like prolific, best documented in the United States UFO experiences?
I don't know what prolific exactly means in that sentence, but I would say it's one of the better known.
Yeah, prolific, like I guess most like legendary or like.
It's one of the few that has multiple video. It was captured by multiple people on video.
Yes, and there are
Whatever
photographs
it may
as
have
well.
been. Yeah, and it was witnessed by thousands of people. We're talking about the Phoenix Lights UFO case for the uninitiated, or those of you that didn't read the title of this episode.
We probably called it "What if the ghost blog was made of dad dogs?" And then
you
put the Phoenix Lights in parentheses, like the episode about the Grammys. That's only about the Grammys for a grand total of like 10 minutes, and then the rest of the 15 minutes is about the O'Hare UFO incident.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Should we do a quick rundown of what the fuck happened that?
Sure.
Eve?
March 13th of 97, there were reports of varying reports of lights seen in the sky by Wikipedia says thousands of people.
Other reports
that does not cite any sort of source, unfortunately.
Yeah, other reports I've seen in a couple other locations say closer to 700.
Okay. And I don't know if that's like people calling police or Air Force or the news or MUFON or all of those combined, or what that number.
Yeah, trying to extrapolate it out of everything.
A bunch of people saw lights in the sky between roughly 7:30 and 10:30 p.m. on March 13th of 97 in an area stretching about 300 miles from Henderson, Nevada, which is like the very southeast corner of Nevada, down to in sort of like an L or like a J, inverted J shape down to Phoenix.
Yeah.
So Henderson, Nevada is about 300 miles to the northwest of Phoenix.
Yep.
And in this kind of curved line from Henderson down to Phoenix, upwards of 1,000 or many thousands of people report seeing varying types of lights in the sky. That can kind of be filtered into two main types of sightings.
Yes.
One of a triangular formation of lights. So sort of like a V shape.
Yep.
That people reported being, I think it was 5 lights, correct, in a V. So there was like one at the point and then 2 down either arm of this V.
Yeah,
was the most common description.
That's the most common one, but the number of lights varies on reports.
Okay.
Well, yes.
So
Go ahead.
Column A, sighting type A, you have this V-shaped either craft or set of lights.
Yeah.
Some people said they were connected and it was opaque in between. Other people just said they saw the lights.
Yeah.
The column B, sighting B, is more of a stationary set of lights that appeared to be hovering in the sky. And depending on who you ask, were or were not connected.
Yes.
And there seems to still be and was a lot of confusion about these two types of sightings, whether it was different people seeing the same thing and describing it differently or seeing it from different vantage points, if it was two totally unrelated sets of things, and one that was seen further to the northwest, one that was seen further to the southeast, or some combination of the two, an object that was moving along that line and therefore seen by different people at different times. It's not really clear. Part of the reason, just real quick, part of the reason that so many people did see it is because it took such a long time to develop. People saw it over the course of 3 to 4 hours, and over a long, or a wide geographical area.
Right.
So people may have already been hearing these reports and then going outside to look and seeing this either coming their way or in the sky in the distance. And also, it was very near to the closest approach to Earth of the Hale-Bopp comet. And it was
I
a
didn't know
very
that.
dark, clear night. It was, I believe, a weekend. And so a lot of people were already outside trying to observe Hale-Bopp and instead saw these weird sets of lights in the sky.
They had their eyes to the skies,
Yeah.
if you will.
I mean, because normally, I don't know what day of the week it was. I think it was a weekend, though. Normally, you wouldn't have a whole bunch of people just like standing around outside looking at the skies at 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Especially, I would guess in March, it's still pretty cool at night out in the desert.
Yeah. It was a Thursday.
Oh, it was a Thursday? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the basic idea of what happened. You want to get into how the sightings varied in terms of where they were seen and what they looked like and who saw them?
Yeah. I think that's a good spot. I mean, the crazy part about the Who is
Like the band?
the crazy part about the Who.
They blew up a drum kit once. That's crazy. It's true, though.
We go from basketball podcast to
You want to talk about 60s rock
music
and roll?
podcast
Want to talk about some Brit rock?
to dog podcast to weird podcast.
This is why we are the preeminent podcasters of our generation, Ryan. We're extremely versatile.
This is also why you're our people
Dog
because dog pod. You guys are our people because we found a community of people who, as often as we do jump into all those things, you go, fuck yeah, I'm here for it, and we love you for
I
that.
think that's just a cult at that point.
Guys, what if we started a cult?
Holy shit! Hey!
No, we did an episode on cults. It was not tight. The episode was good. Cults, not so much.
Yeah, conclusion, not tight.
No, not very. Not a lot of like, oh, sick cult, bro. It's like, no, that's not. It's not the move.
Not what it's about. Should we start with Henderson?
We can start with Henderson. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have Henderson specifically on mine. I know Henderson
Okay.
was the first 911 call that came in.
Yeah, so the first report, as far as we can tell, came from a gentleman in Henderson, Nevada, which again is at the very southeast corner of Nevada, who described seeing a V-shaped object and estimated it was about the size of a 747. He said it sounded like, quote, rushing wind and had 6 lights on its leading edge.
So this is when it starts to vary, right? So the first one says it had 6 lights on its leading edge.
Mm-hmm.
So some people reported seeing 7 lights. Did this person mean there was a point light and then on the leading edge coming off it at an angle, there was 3 and 3, which would have been 6 lights on a leading edge with a
Right.
point light?
Because an even number doesn't really make sense on a V-shaped object.
Unless it's a non-symmetrical one.
Right.
There
Right.
were some reports of people who from the further north location saw what they stated was what appeared to be one light trailing for a while, but then that light
Trailing another set of lights. So the 6 set of 6 and then another individual light trailing behind?
I don't have it specific to a number,
But
of
something like
scene,
that?
but something where there was a trailing light. So that potentially didn't match the formation. But that said, all of the video and photos that are out there, most of the video and photos that are out there are of a relatively crisp, if you will, formation.
So 2 things. First, with the wording of this report, if you see lights in the sky,
Which one are you reading off of right now?
this is I don't have the gentleman's name, but the first person from Henderson who reported seeing this.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you meant the report that you were pulling notes from. Got it.
No. If you describe seeing lights in the sky that form an object roughly the size of an airplane,
Yes.
and you hear, quote, rushing wind, I'm confused about what makes that not either one or multiple airplanes.
You're saying
Those are all descriptions of airplanes. In some cases, literally, and in others, more generally.
Yeah. So the one characteristic that I've seen called out in like a bunch of the articles I read is that the perceived, whether or not accurate, the perceived altitude of these lights didn't seem airplane-like. They were actually perceived as like significantly lower than like a 747 would be. A lot of people ballparked it around like the 3 to 5 to 7,000 feet. So
I mean, those are all ranges that airplanes fly at.
Can fly, yeah. But I mean, you wouldn't look at that and be like, oh, there's a 747 up there.
Right.
Because it wouldn't be, I mean, air 747s are only at 6,000 feet when they're taking off. The other characteristic, just really quick, the other characteristic that people really pointed to a lot in the articles that I saw was, outside of the altitude, was the brightness of them. They appeared to be, to most people, single, very, very, very bright lights, like uncharacteristically bright lights for an airplane. So, obviously, if you see an airplane in the sky, you're seeing like blinking on the wings or, the red blinking dot. It wasn't any of those things that were reported. It was just this single, like extremely intense light that people were seeing.
Yeah. I just wonder, I don't think I would be able to even estimate altitude of a light source.
Sure.
At night.
No. Yeah.
I mean, if I see a
either.
craft during the day and I can see the outline of it, I can see something for comparison, I could probably get close.
Yeah.
A light in the sky at night, I mean, anywhere from, I guess I could be pretty sure it's not like 100 feet away.
Right.
But anywhere from like 1,000 to
15,000 feet. Yeah.
Or 30, or fucking stars are light years away. Like,
right.
I don't know how you would go about getting any sort of accurate estimate.
No, I think especially too, because the brain plays tricks on you when you don't know how fast something is moving or how large a thing is.
Exactly. There's so many variables. I don't know how you could suss out altitude.
Right. Like something might, if it's a really big light, but it's really far away, but it's moving really slowly, that could look like it's a totally different altitude depending on what you're ballparking those other two dimensions on.
Because in this case, there's at least one contradictory report. A gentleman named Mitch Stanley, who was an amateur astronomer and happened to be looking through his telescope that night. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming for the comet, probably.
He actually, the article I found that mentions him says that he's just straight up like in his yard every night. Like was his...
That would do it too, I guess.
It was his fucking jam. He would just go chill out there and like look at the sky.
If you've never done it, I'd highly recommend it. If you're at all handy, you can build a telescope. He was looking through his, I believe, homemade Dobsonian telescope that had roughly 43 times magnification. Saw these lights, focused his... What?
I'm sorry, I felt like there was a really good moment there to use our he's fucking big, but
yeah, that boy big.
There it is.
It may have been a large telescope.
There we go.
It's hard to say. And he focused his telescope on the lights, and when they were magnified 43 times, he claimed that he could see pretty clearly two lights that to the naked eye appeared as one. Yep. So for each of these 6 or whatever it was, if you were to zoom in on them, were actually 2 lights close together.
Yeah.
And he concluded, he said pretty confidently that they were airplanes.
Yeah, so much so that like he was in his yard. Apparently he was hanging out with his mom in the yard, and he was so confident that they were planes that like he basically just told his mom like, "Oh, it's planes." And like sat back down in his chair and didn't even tell her to be like, hey, you should look at this. This is kind of crazy. It was like, oh, it's just a formation of airplanes. Like, don't even think about it twice.
So like, aren't we done with that one?
Well, we're not.
The guy heard whooshing sounds. He said it looked sort of like an airplane. Dude focuses his telescope on it and says, oh yeah, those are airplanes.
So the only reason that we're not is because air traffic control and all the surrounding airports from Phoenix had no reports of a flight path or of there being anything on radar. So that's the hole in that one, is that there was no radar signal for any of the actual crafts, and that there was no flight path that was supposed to be doing what they were doing. The other thing
there
about
is
that,
a pretty strong military presence in the area, though, is there not?
there is, for sure. For sure.
Is that something that's not something that air traffic control would handle, right?
No, but they would be like alerted if there was some sort of route that was going to be flying through their space. They'd have to be, otherwise airplanes could take down other airplanes.
I mean, unless they're at 60,000 feet or something.
I suppose. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible.
I don't.
The other thing about it that doesn't make
pretty likely explanation considering the very few pieces of information we do have.
The other thing that doesn't make a lot of sense to me about that explanation, I totally agree with you on that. But the thing that doesn't make sense to me about it is, well, two things. One is the amount of time that it took those airplanes to fly that path. Mm-hmm. So like if they were in the sky for 3 to 4 hours and they only flew through, was it 300 miles? Like airplanes don't fly at 100 miles an hour. They fall out of the sky at 300 miles an hour. Or at 100 miles an hour, excuse me.
Okay. So I think that's a good transition to the other sightings.
Okay, sure. Yes.
Because I don't think it was one thing.
Yes, and I should have...
And that gets conflated a lot in the reports and debunking of or confirming of these events, is that it gets presented, and I honestly, even having heard about it and read about it before, had to be reminded today, researching, it's right. It was two separate things.
Yeah.
Or at least potentially was two separate things that may have two separate explanations.
Right. So
the second set of sightings happened, there were sort of three, in the area of Prescott Valley, which is sort of roughly halfway between Henderson, Nevada and Phoenix, Arizona. But if you were to draw a line, it's like a little bit northeast of that line.
And this is the column B that you mentioned earlier.
Yes. So there were multiple reports of a sort of cluster of lights in the sky. And they were all the same color. They were sort of a reddish, orangish color. Some people reported them being aligned or being in sort of a triangular pattern. Mm-hmm. Other people described it being more like just sort of a cluster.
Yep.
And they were observed for a period of, depending on the report, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 minutes over Prescott Valley, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
People were not able to estimate the altitude, which seems odd considering how willing people usually are to estimate as wildly as it may be the altitude of objects or lights. And no one reported, as far as I could find, the objects making any type of sound.
Mm-hmm.
There are some reports of the objects or the lights, whatever they might be, moving or sort of like turning, banking.
Mm.
Other people reported them hovering or more like drifting, I guess.
Yep.
And then in Phoenix, and these things happened sort of in succession chronologically. Mm-hmm. The Henderson reports happened first around 7:30, and then the rest of this evolved over the next 3 to 4 hours.
Yep.
The Phoenix sightings were sort of similar to the Prescott Valley sightings in that people saw, the first report was of 5 distinct lights that appeared to form sort of an arc shape, or like I think what people interpreted it as, if you were to imagine like a disc or a flying saucer in the traditional sense,
yep,
it might appear to be like the outer rim or the outer edge of that object as it's facing you.
Sure. So
sort of a slight curve, maybe towards you or sort of out from a center point.
Yep.
If you look on YouTube, this is the most commonly, I think there is the most footage of this version of the sighting.
Yep.
over this sort of valley near Phoenix. A lot of people film these lights for several minutes at a time. If you watch that footage, the lights sort of blink at least in. So it's not at, someone started filming when there was one or two lights.
Yep.
And the rest sort of appear after this first one. So it's not like there's suddenly 5 in the sky all aligned. You have 1 or 2, and then you have 3, and then you have 4, and then you have 5.
Yep.
And they're all sort of roughly in line with each other. And they eventually disappeared behind this mountain range that they, I guess, were either above or behind.
Mm-hmm.
There were some slight variations on that report, although I'm more skeptical of these varying reports because they came out much later. So this happened on March 13th.
Yep.
There's a USA Today article that came out, I believe, in June 18th.
Yeah.
So roughly 3 months later.
After
that really
you've
sort
had-
of broke the story on a national level.
Yeah. After you've had time to talk to your friends and neighbors and say, what did you see? What did you see? Well, I
Right.
felt like it was like this. And then people are developing
And
a narrative.
a lot of the narrative that is sort of stuck comes from this reporting that was done or at least published 3 months later.
Yep.
And some of those reports include things like people seeing a craft that was over a mile wide
Mm-hmm.
in the range of 6,000 feet.
And just to clarify, what they mean by that is like that curved edge that you're talking about of these lights. Basically, people were saying, there's a couple of reports. I actually have one quote in here where someone said they felt like it blocked out the stars. So there was some reports said that they couldn't see the stars sort of directly behind or around that sort of arc of lights.
Yes. And related to that, people reported that these lights or this craft, whatever it may be, was moving slowly over this area.
Yep.
Sometimes like stopping to hover in one location.
Mm-hmm.
It was reported in the USA Today article. And that's where some of the stories about, well, it passed right over me and it couldn't have been more than 100 feet up. And when it went over, I couldn't see the stars behind it, or it blocked out the moon when it went in front of the moon. So there's that level of stuff of like, no, I for sure saw a craft.
Yep.
And it was this big and it looked like this and it flew over my house and it stopped over my neighbor's house. There's that kind of stuff. And then there's also, if you go even farther, there's some reports of people behaving weirdly and attributing their odd behavior to this sighting.
I missed this.
So, I mean, this is pretty commonly reported in UFO sightings, close encounters of any variety.
See, dude, this is why we need a sighting, because we could do some real wild shit and be like, the ship made me do it.
Also, I missed a great opportunity when we said that the craft was a mile wide for...
Yeah, that boy big.
There it is.
We're now retroactively applying our favorite sounders.
We're gonna find a place for it pretty much every episode going forward.
So some people reported odd behavior or odd sensations, feelings, emotions connected to their sighting. James Fox, who is a documentary director. Did you ever watch I Know What I Saw?
I did.
He directed that, which also has some great eyewitness testimony about this specific sighting.
Yeah, highly recommend it if you've never watched that documentary. It's fucking awesome.
He also made a film called Out of the Blue, also about UFOs, which is of a similar quality. I would also, either one of those are like a pretty good introduction to the whole UFO phenomena.
I haven't seen Out of the Blue. Is that focused on a specific incident or?
No. I mean, they're both sort of, I think, I watched them like back to back and a long time ago, so I may be conflating, but I think they're both sort of a like an overview style. Yeah. They don't focus entirely on one event or one like type of event.
For some reason, I feel like I Know What I Saw has like a significant portion that is dedicated to the Phoenix Lights.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is one that he spent a lot of time on and got a lot of reports of, interviewed a lot of people who had observed it. Anyway, several of the people that he talked to happened to be working together when they saw these lights. And they said that they watched the lights appear and disappear over a, quote, period of time, but didn't speak to each other about it. And as soon as it was done, we went right back to our work. So, and only later realized that was weird that we all saw this thing, watched it together, and then just didn't say anything about it and went about our business. Jim Mann, who is the director of Arizona MUFON, for whatever that's worth in your world, spoke to, I mean, I don't know how else to put it. Some people put a lot of stock in MUFON. Some people fucking hate MUFON. I think I'm somewhere in the middle.
Oh, that was really good.
Just like sheer ambivalence at its finest. I mean, whatever that means to you, folks.
I haven't been involved enough on a personal level to have a strong opinion.
Yeah.
Either positively or negatively, but I've heard both.
Yes.
And I've heard a lot of both. So I know it's a divisive topic.
No, completely. But
I can't really speak to how or why.
And you threaded that needle perfectly and your tone brought me joy. That's really what it was. You threaded it perfectly. Are they trash?
That's for you to decide.
We don't know.
Jim Mann, director of Arizona MUFON, spoke to or interviewed someone who stopped his car along the side of the road to watch these lights, and found that several other people had also stopped near him to watch these lights.
Yep.
As, quote, a craft slowly glided overhead. Not a word was spoken, and after it went by, everyone got in their car and drove on. So again, with the sort of, I don't know, just out of character behavior or a sense of like calm or normalcy in the moment, and then later realizing like that was fucking
fucked up.
That was weird that we all just stood here and watched a UFO and then went on with our day.
All right, well,
I mean, it's related to, you hear a lot of reports about like I was compelled to go outside and look up, and then when I did, I saw this thing and I felt this certain way about it.
Yeah.
And then the next day I woke up and was like, what the fuck? Why did I go outside and look at that thing last night?
Right. And also it's probably a later realization that like, you're like, if I had been in my right mind, I think I would have been like, Jesus Christ, what the fuck is that?
Right.
And you would have like,
we should have been scared
or taking photos or
exactly.
calling people or whatever. But instead you're just like, huh.
Which to me
cool alien ship anyway.
Also reads as like really convenient.
Yeah.
For why there aren't photos of this craft if you guys all watched it fly 40 feet over your head.
I mean,
or why there
are.
Of the craft? Of a craft within 40 feet?
No. Yes. Yeah. Got it. Not of a craft, no. But I mean, we're talking about, what cameras people had available to them in 1997, taking photos of the night sky, which is unfortunately not many and not great.
Someone on YouTube, however, took, so there are a few videos, like camcorder, homemade footage of these lights, primarily the Phoenix, reddish orange lights in a row version of it.
Yep.
That are available on YouTube and have been in a bunch of documentaries and on TV and stuff. And if you've heard about this, you've probably seen some version of those. Someone on YouTube took the longest of them. It's like a 4-minute clip and stabilized the whole thing.
That's cool.
Because I think all of them are like handheld camcorder, somebody trying to zoom in and out, trying to move around whatever obstacles.
Right.
And somebody stabilized it. So you just have like this 4-minute pretty clear, stable image of these lights, and with some what's the word I'm looking for? I guess sort of landmarks for scale and to compare.
Oh, that's cool.
What you're actually looking at. So it's not just lights against a black background, which makes it totally impossible to figure out what you're looking at, or how big it is, or how far away it is, or anything like that. So if you are interested in like seeing what most people saw that night, you can find it pretty easily on YouTube, and actually in a better quality in a way than it has been publicly before. I think that's it, unless I'm missing anything in terms of what people reported seeing that night?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it. The only thing that's interesting is, and you kind of covered this a little bit in the initial introduction to column B, but this idea that some people saw the hovering system of lights as a persistent sort of together thing. There are some reports of people saying that they were more orb-like in nature and that they were moving independently from each other. So just as an additional piece of information related to what people claimed to have seen.
Sure. Let's take a quick break then, and I have a piece of audio I want to get your opinion on when we come back in just a second.
We interrupt your program
to pay our fucking bills, mate.
Aye. Yo, it's the shout-outs. We got a new section on the show that is very close to my heart. I'm having a really good time with this, and I love that you guys are participating. We're doing shout-outs now. If you go to whatifpodcast.com/shoutout, one word, shout-out, you can get a shout-out on the show. It's $50, and for anything under 200 words, we'll shout it out. It can be literally anything, as evidenced by our first two shout-outs on today's episode.
All right, I'll do the first one. You got the second one?
Yes, deal.
All right, first one. Scott is one damn good-looking man. Like the best-looking man I've ever seen. We should all be like Scott.
Shout out to Scott from Georgia for using, 20% of his shout-outs length to just have us tell him that he's a good-looking man.
My man got straight to the point.
Scott, you're pretty. You're so pretty. You're the best looking man
overtime shout-outs
you've ever seen. We gotta give him a little bit of love. Hey,
right.
Good for you, Scott. You've got it on wax forever.
Fucking earned it, bud.
Us telling you that you're pretty forever. Thanks, Scott from Georgia.
Your turn.
Our second shout out this week is, see, this is what I meant by could be anything. Shout out to David in New Jersey. David's shout out coming in right under the wire at 193 words.
Oh, did you check it? I was going to say he used all the words that Scott did not use.
I checked. Yeah, okay. That's right. For a second, I was like, oh, damn, he went. I would have read it anyway. I don't care. It's a soft 200 word goal. All right. If you guys write a novel, we'll cut you off. But yeah, Dave from New Jersey says, God bless this. Do you enjoy detective shows like The Wire or The Shield?
Yeah.
Do you like Shane Black written buddy cop movies like The Nice Guys and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang?
Probably.
With flawed characters and quick wit?
Yeah.
Well, please check out Terriers.
Okay.
It premiered 9 years ago on FX and was canceled after a perfect 13-episode season, and I can't stop loving this show.
Fuck yeah.
Starring Donald Logue from Gotham and Grounded for Life, and Michael Raymond James from True Blood and Once Upon a Time. They play Hank Dolworthy and Britt Pollock, an ex-cop and ex-thief, now unlicensed private eyes in Ocean Beach, San Diego, California.
Yeah, I was just there. It was cool.
Caught in a case of corruption and cover-ups.
I didn't do that.
Currently only able to be bought on Amazon Video, but I assure you it is worth your time and money. The AV Club ranked it as number 7 on their list of best shows of 2010. IGN's Matt Fowler gave the entire season a 10 and called it a massively gratifying TV experience like no other. IGN also gave Terriers their award for Best New Series of 2010. The series received a nomination for Outstanding New Program by the Television Critics Association.
That shout out was so long, there's a different beat playing now. I thought I was good.
No, it's perfect. So that's already one of my favorite uses of shout-outs is I'm just going to start telling people about a television show I like a lot that I want them to go check out.
From 9 years ago.
But
call it 7 because maybe I wrote this copy 2 years ago and have just been waiting for the perfect moment.
No, he says it premiered 9 years ago.
Oh, okay.
You got it right.
All right.
Got it right.
If you want us to talk about whatever the fuck you want us to talk about, whatifpodcast.com/shoutout.
Yeah, you can share your funness with thousands of listeners around the world.
And for the rest of y'all that have already done it, we got you next week.
Yeah, we'll keep them moving. So big thanks to Scott, big thanks to Dave, and thank y'all for supporting the show. Hope they were fun. We'll keep doing them.
Later. Now back to the show.
Back to your regularly scheduled program.
Ryan, can I play a piece of audio for you and then get your reaction to it?
Sure. sure, although am I scared?
No.
Okay, good.
Well, I mean, you shouldn't be. I can't say if you're scared or not. You don't need to be.
You are now. Just play like some like very loud horrorcore into my headphones.
Tell me what you think about this Marilyn Manson song. No, this is it's a little long. It's about 1.5 minutes, but this is a one person's version of events from that night.
Yeah.
March 13th, 1997. This event called Lights Over Phoenix. What did you see?
Well, I saw a huge craft just kind of come right over Squaw Peak. That was, it was just breathtaking. And I'm not sure about the date. You've got a better memory
March
for the
13th.
dates than I do. Yeah.
But there was no, like the Clinton day, no.
No. No.
He's asking him if he was smoking weed that day,
Oh.
and he said no.
I was on a strict diet.
There was a
strict
hand
diet.
there was a hand motion that you missed if you had the audio only.
Sure.
No, I'm serious. I'm serious now. That it was a.
I said I wasn't fucking high, man.
UFO.
Also, referring to smoking weed as the Clinton diet, I'm not mad at it.
But is that what he called it? The Clinton diet?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he said, "Was there any Clinton something?" And then the other guy said, "No, I was on a strict diet," implying that not being on that strict diet, maybe the Clinton diet, also put it on the list.
The Clinton
Which
diet?
means
Oh, that's pretty good.
flying object.
Doesn't mean we're being visited.
Well, it's nothing like anything I've ever seen.
And you're an Air Force guy.
Yeah, and a pilot. Got a lot of hours flying, so it was pretty breathtaking. And I'll never forget. I snuck out to see it, without DPS, which I'm not supposed to be driving my own car. And that kind of thing. And so, but I told Ann what I was doing. I was going to go up to Squaw Peak and see what everybody was, clamoring about. And when I walked in the front door, she looked at me, and I was apparently normally I'm fair complected and pale anyway, right? And she said, "Oh my gosh," she said, "you look like a ghost. What did you see?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what I saw, but it was really something, and I'm not going to talk about it."
Do you know who that is?
No.
It's your guy Fife.
Fife
Dog.
Fife Dog.
Fife Diggy.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't recognize his voice. I watched the video of his press conference, but I didn't. I don't. For some reason, I didn't put that together.
So that's Fife Symington, former governor of Arizona, was governor of Arizona in 97 when this occurred.
How dare you disrespect his name by not calling him his full John Fife Symington III?
I apologize.
Come on, man. What kind of name is that? John Fife Symington III?
A lovely name.
No, what I'm saying is he shouldn't be the governor of Arizona. He should be like the Knight of Glastonbury or something like that. Like, he's a complete and total fucking fairy tale character, and I love it.
And that's why the UFOs chose to reveal themselves to him.
To John. Although they might have made a bad choice because John Fifington is great.
I'm glad you thought that was funny.
just mishmashing his whole fucking name in here. John Fife Symington, who did go by Fife Symington, held a press conference the week after the Phoenix Lights happened.
Yeah, that interview that we just listened to, or the excerpt of that interview, was from 2014. So
yeah,
much more recently.
Yeah, and the week after the Phoenix Lights happened, the governor of Arizona had a very different story to tell. So the hundreds and thousands of people had started a bit of a, I don't know what you would call it. I mean, a little bit of a media storm. People were confused and asking questions and calling, well, again, the night of, they were calling 911, and there was newspaper stories about it and people asking questions, like kind of demanding answers around.
Yeah. Can we get some explanation of what that was? Because obviously it was something. I mean, a bunch of us saw it. We have video of it. Something was there.
Can you tell us what that was? Yeah. And no one had come forth to communicate, oh, this was like so far
this test flight or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Mitch, the amateur astronomer. What's that?
Hedberg.
Huh?
I'm just naming Mitch's. I don't know his last name.
The Mitch astronomer kid had not been like documented yet, so there just wasn't a lot of answers. So Symington holds a press conference and says, "We've identified the responsible parties, and I'd like to bring them out now," and pulls into what most people assumed was going to be a relatively serious press conference.
Generally, if you're having a press conference with the governor,
yes,
that would be a pretty safe assumption, yeah.
And also a press conference that was said to be in response to this thing that's sort of creating a bit of a public outcry.
Yeah.
And out from behind the curtain walks one of the governor's aides in handcuffs with a like green alien costume on and a cape.
Hey, constituents, get fucked.
Fuck. Hey, do you want answers? How about fuck you? Oh, okay.
How about you answer these nuts? Riddle me these nuts.
Riddle me these nuts. Yeah, so he basically...
I'm bringing these nuts jokes back in 2019, by the way. I know it's only been like 3 years. Bringing it back.
Bringing it back.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing it back strong. He basically ridicules everybody's concerns and questions and makes a joke about it being aliens. And like nothing actually serious came out of the press conference. He wasn't like, all jokes aside, we've talked to so-and-so and so-and-so parties. They've told us that it's this, so everybody can go not worry. Like none of that happened. He just basically made a bunch of jokes about it and went on his merry way.
So the official explanation for the Phoenix area sighting came from the Air Force and is essentially that they were dropping this type of long burning illumination flare from a flight of 4 A-10 Warthog aircraft. As part of a training exercise at the Barry Goldwater Range at Luke Air Force Base near Phoenix.
Yes.
I'm assuming that came out later. I don't know the chronology of the press conference versus this Air Force explanation.
I do know it was later. I don't know how much later.
Okay.
The way I understand it is that the official explanation from the Air Force came out like significantly later because apparently there was some work done by like councilmen and women in the Phoenix area who were trying to advocate for their constituents.
You're saying like city council people?
Yeah, people on the city council who were, had concerned constituents who were trying to go to people, higher up than them or people
in like the governor perhaps?
Like the governor perhaps, yeah, to be like, haha, cute joke. But seriously, people want to know what the fuck's going on.
Can we get an actual answer? Or if we don't have one, can we try and find one?
Right. So I don't know to what extent all of those pursuits for information created an actual piece of information, but I think it took some time for them to come out and actually say what had happened from their perspective.
So before we start recording, you said to me that you think this is one of the more interesting UFO cases we've looked at because you feel like there are significant holes in or problems with the explanations for both versions of this sighting.
Well, yes and no.
I feel like the flares explanation for the Phoenix part of this sighting, of the row of lights roughly a mile across, the video footage that shows them
blinking on,
blinking on in succession, no sound being made, them being visible until they eclipsed a mountain range. I mean, that all sounds like the behavior of flares being dropped to me. Another part of the explanation from the Air Force was that, so it's I don't know what they use to illuminate the flare, but something is burning.
Yeah.
It's some sort of fuel that burns over a long period of time and very brightly. So these last for quite a while and they can be seen from a long distance. They have some type of parachute attached to them so that they stay in the air for a while.
Yep.
I guess with this type of flare, sometimes the heat being given off by the flare itself burning in certain atmospheric conditions can create sort of a hot air balloon effect and cause the flares to either actually rise temporarily or kind of hover in one spot for a while.
Yep.
Again, makes sense or seems to line up with what people were seeing that night. Do you see issues with that explanation?
Yes and no. I do think, like, logically, a lot of it makes sense. There's a couple elements of it that I waver on a little bit. One of them is if you look at the video of the lights coming on, like you said, they kind of in sequence illuminate in this sort of cyclical path or curved path or whatever you want to call it.
It's essentially right to left on most of the videos from whatever angle they were being filmed from. But it's like in order across the screen from what appears to be roughly the same height. They just sort of appear.
Yep. There's not like, and I guess there's something that could account for this, but there doesn't appear to be an airplane anywhere. Like there's no lights of an airplane anywhere near those lights.
Yeah.
So that's a thing for me that caused some confusion, is like, it would make sense to me if there's an airplane with two blinking lights on it going beep, beep, beep across the sky, and then all of a sudden out of its sort of trailing, path, you're seeing these things light up following the plane. But I don't see any of that in any of the footage, so it kind of makes me go, well, where were they coming from then if there's not a very visible airplane? I guess
I don't know enough about military aircraft and specifically the A-10 Warthog or whatever it was.
Yeah.
In terms of like, how large is that? Is it illuminated in the same way that commercial airplanes are illuminated, with in terms of blinking lights on the ends of the wings and a light on front? Was it intentionally concealed for some reason?
Yeah.
As part of this training exercise?
Sure.
It does seem odd to me that you wouldn't have heard something.
Right. The other thing too is like they say
I don't know anything about that aircraft.
Right, I don't either, and that's why I'm just sort of like, I'm more poking holes by asking questions, but not necessarily like I don't think that I'm right. The other thing was, they said there's 4 A-10s, but when the lights come on, they feel very much like they're in a path. Like I could see it if it was one airplane dropping them all, but they look very like at a distinct interval. They look like they kind of come around this curve, and I was like, that doesn't feel like 4 airplanes dropping them in a similar space.
The problem is we're looking at it two-dimensionally.
Sure.
And because we don't have the context of distance, we don't know. I mean, one of those flares could be significantly closer or farther to us than the one next to it.
Definitely.
Right? We're looking at it flattened.
Definitely. But I guess what I'm trying to say is from most of the visual evidence we have, it appears to be relatively geometric to some extent.
Yes.
Like there is a sequence, a pattern, a shape to the way that they're laid out, I would say.
Yeah. It appears that way from like the 1 or 2 angles we really have. I wouldn't feel totally confident saying that is what's happening, but it does definitely look that way.
Yeah, and I think maybe my seeing that evidence is bolstered by the fact that it seems like that's also what a lot of the eyewitnesses are saying, is like it felt like they were evenly spaced, geometrically laid out in some capacity. So I guess would
that not be possible though by multiple airplanes? Or would that maybe like, couldn't that even be the purpose of this training exercise, is to create some sort of structured drop or something?
It certainly could be. I guess my thought was,
I'm sure they weren't doing it randomly.
Yeah. 4 airplanes couldn't draw one line, right? Like it's like if I'm trying to trace with a pen.
But that's what I'm saying. They could be flying. So this is really hard to describe. If we're looking on, say we're looking at a plane like side on, right? The other 3 could be behind it.
So they each are dropping them like in succession almost?
Yeah.
So they're flying in a line and they're all dropping one or whatever.
Each flare could be 100, 200, 500 feet behind from our vantage point, the previous one. and because of the distance or whatever, we wouldn't necessarily interpret that distance between them.
Yeah.
Right? They would appear still to us to be in a straight line.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's what happened, but it seems possible at least.
Totally. And I can totally get behind that it's a totally plausible explanation for what happened that night.
Less plausible to me is that 4 fighter aircraft would not have been heard by anyone.
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well.
That part does seem weird.
Like that it just came out of silence, I think, is also part of it.
Having just been in San Diego where there are military aircraft taking off constantly,
yeah,
it's loud as fuck.
Yeah.
It's like significantly louder than a normal commercial jet.
Right, because their engines are crazy powerful.
I don't know anything about what types of planes they're flying there versus what was flying out of Luka Doncic Air Force Base in 1997, whatever that place was.
Barry Goldwater?
No.
Oh, Luke Air Force Base.
Just Luke.
Yeah.
Well, Luke Bahamut Air Force Base in 97.
The other version of it that I can see being possible for not hearing anything is if they were flying at a crazy high height, if they were flying at 80,000 feet and they drop these parachutes and the lights
illuminated until much later,
don't ignite until 2 or 3 minutes into their fall. Like maybe the parachute pops and then they illuminate.
That's a very good point.
3 minutes later, that would prevent you from hearing an airplane, would still account for the drop, and potentially for, well, we didn't see what path they were flying in, but to your point, they could have flown in succession, done their drops, and then they all illuminated at, a certain height.
Also, seems like a thing that may need some practice if you're trying to get the timing right on however those flares are illuminated. If you're trying to time it or do it remotely or something, that seems like something you might need to take a few practice runs at.
For sure. So to that though, here's another part of why I find their official explanation a little bit goofy is, to your USA article point, like this had come out by June, was like gaining steam as a national story. People were super confused, asking a ton of questions.
It was a big story. I found a scan of the original USA Today article.
Is it like,
it's not a small article. I mean, it's probably, it's cut up like column by column the way I'm looking at it, but it's like, it was probably a full page in the USA Today.
Yeah.
In the A section.
Word. So it had a bunch of buzz behind it. And I guess my thought, or one of the things that I felt like was a little shady about it, is like, if this is a thing that is like, hey, we just did a training exercise and we dropped some flares over Phoenix, it's like twofold. One, do you not warn the people of Phoenix that there's going to be a military exercise happening over their city and they might see something that's generally...
no.
I mean, probably not, but it also just seems
Didn't
like,
that
why
just happen
not?
in LA?
Which part?
Weren't there a bunch of like military helicopters flying over downtown LA and people were unawares until it was happening?
Oh, I didn't hear about that, but
have you ever,
possible.
we don't live somewhere with like a large military presence, but I don't think you go around telling people about what you're about to do.
Well, I guess I would think if it's an exercise, so you're not doing anything, shady, hopefully. But if you're not
the military's never done anything shady. What are you talking about,
right,
Ryan?
Exactly. But like if you're not doing anything shady and it is just an exercise and you are going to do it in a massively populous city over the city, wouldn't you want to give them a heads up? What if it did cause hysteria? What if people did clog up emergency lines and prevent people from getting emergency care?
There's evidence to the contrary for that, is all I'm saying.
To what?
That this shit happens all the time, that the military does
wild shit.
Yeah, and they're not obligated to tell anybody anything.
No, they're definitely not obligated to, but it seems like something, and this is the twofold part, it seems like something you'd want to do. And then the second part would be, okay, if you didn't want to do it and
you know who's not very good at doing things that it seems like you might want to do?
And the second part of it to me is, if there's like a total fucking firestorm nationally about this happening, why not send out 4 A-10 Warthogs on a night 2 months later, 5 months later, 10 months later, and say, you guys, relax. It was a training exercise. We can replicate it right now.
Well,
Here you go.
That did happen.
Did that specifically, though, to address this situation?
Not with the military's cooperation, but some news, I forget who it was, like the local ABC affiliate in Phoenix, basically tried to recreate it using flares and essentially did. It looks very similar.
Word.
Also, this is from ABC 7 in LA.
Heyo.
Military exercises rattling nerves around LA. Army helicopters landing on Wilshire Boulevard and other military activities are turning parts of LA into scenes from a war movie this week.
Yikes.
Military is conducting training exercises, but have caught many locals by surprise when a helicopter flew low in between buildings in downtown LA.
And like, even if you don't broadcast your plans to the entirety of the populace, do you maybe tell the governor of the city that you're going to be dropping your flare demonstration over, that this is a thing that he might want to know about, that he can calm the public on, that you could have a PR response for? And then if the military doesn't want to recreate it and you have to rely on news recreating it, the other question I have is, why has it never been seen again? Did they run that practice exercise one time and then they're never going to run it again with no more pilots in any other locations?
We're still talking about it 20 some years later on a dumb podcast.
But why wouldn't they just do it again and be like, see, that was the same thing of the Phoenix Lights?
Fuck about what we think about it.
No. I'm not saying
And I would be annoyed at them spending money to do it again to tell a bunch of idiots that it wasn't aliens.
No. What I'm saying is, why wouldn't it have happened again in their normal course of process and procedure?
Because they probably changed said process and procedure because this one was such a big problem.
I guess. I just feel like
if I didn't exercise and it was all over the news the next day, I might rethink how I'm doing that exercise next time.
Maybe, or logic would also dictate that you could just keep doing it and be like, see, it's the same thing you saw last time. Yes, we did another exercise.
A lot of people are going to take that the opposite way and be like, see, the aliens are back.
Yeah, I mean, yes. It just seems like it would be a pretty easy way to squash the conversation.
Also, maybe they nailed it and they didn't need to do it again.
We're fine forever. You four guys, don't ever retire or die. Just you. If we got to drop flares like this, it's you guys and no backups.
Yeah. All right. Real quick before we wrap, your thoughts on the multiple airplanes flying in formation explanation for the first half of these sightings, the Henderson, Nevada stuff.
So I think that one is totally possible to account for that part. I think I too conflate, and I think some of the actual reports conflate the both experiences.
As if it were one.
And
neither of these explanations works for the other,
right,
or for both combined.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I go, that's why I had said, well, planes don't fly that slow. Well, if it was planes that then turned off all their lights and then turned off all their radar transponders and dropped a set of flares, that would account for lights becoming lights in a different, a moving way to a hovering way, pretty visibly.
God damn! That might be the closest we've ever gotten to an explanation for a thing that we've talked about on this show.
Yeah. And I think you're right, man. I think yes, the Air Force is going to try shit and they're going to test shit and they're not accountable to other departments or people in the world. I would think with something that's that visible and that much of a, again, a potentially panic inducing thing, if there's lights, craft, etc. I just feel like the safety of the population would be, something you'd want to take into consideration.
I wish I had as much faith as you.
I'm not saying...
I would have thought we wouldn't have gone to war with Iraq.
Well, and here we are, 20 years later. One thing I wanted to read before we run is Fife Dog.
That's disrespectful to Fife Dog.
That's true. Fife Symington III had...
That's disrespectful to Paul Symington I.
God damn it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Put out an op-ed on CNN. I don't know how long after this was, but obviously we didn't say it explicitly, but from his time in office when he basically ridiculed this thing and was like, it's not a big deal, he did a massive 180 in his personal life.
Well, yes and no. I mean, that's part of why I wanted to play you that other audio from 2014, is that he says in it, like, he walked into his office and said, I don't know what that was, but I'm not going to talk about it.
Sure. I guess what I mean by 180 is the way he chose to talk about it was by ridiculing what it was instead of saying, hey, I saw it too, and it was really strange.
I don't know what it's like to be in office versus not in office, too, because I think his tune changed basically once he was no longer governor of Arizona.
Sure. And this article that I'm about to read you a chunk from is definitely afterwards, but he went even further than I don't know what I saw.
Okay.
He says, in 1997, during my second term as governor of Arizona, I saw something that defied logic and changed my reality. I witnessed a massive delta-shaped craft silently navigate over Squaw Park, a mountain range in Phoenix, Arizona. It was breathtaking. I was stunned because I was turning to the west looking for the distant Phoenix lights. To my astonishment, this apparition appeared. This dramatically large, very distinctive leading edge with some enormous lights was traveling through the Arizona sky.
Yeah, that boy big.
There it is.
Apologize if you're deaf now.
That was a hot one. As a pilot and former Air Force officer, I can definitively say that this craft did not resemble any man-made object I had ever seen and was certainly not high-altitude flares because flares don't fly in formation. The incident was witnessed by hundreds, if not thousands, of Arizona people, and my office was besieged with phone calls from concerned Arizonians. The growing hysteria intensified when the story broke nationally, and I decided to lighten the mood of my state by calling a press conference where my chief of staff arrived in an alien costume. We talked about this.
Great decision, Fife.
We managed to lessen the sense of panic, but at the same time upset many of my constituents, and this is really what I wanted to get to. I would now like to set the record straight. I never meant to ridicule anyone. My office did make inquiries into the origin of the craft, but to this day, they remain unanswered. Eventually, the Air Force claimed responsibility, stating that they dropped flares. This is indicative of the attitude from official channels. We got explanations that fly in the face of facts. Explanations like weather balloons, swamp gas, and military flares. I was never happy with the Air Force's silly explanation. There might very well have been military flares in the sky that evening, but what I and hundreds of others saw had nothing to do with that. I now know I am not alone. There are many high-ranking military, aviation, and government officials who share my concerns. While on active duty, they have either witnessed a UFO incident or have conducted an official investigation into UFO cases relevant to aviation safety and national security.
Talk to him, Fife.
By speaking out with me, these people are putting their reputations on the line. They have fought in wars, guarded top-secret weapons arsenals, and protected our nation's skies. We want the government to stop putting out stories that perpetuate the myth that all UFOs can be explained away in down-to-earth conventional terms. Investigations need to be reopened, documents need to be unsealed, and the idea of an open dialogue can no longer be shunned. Incidents like this are simply not going away. About a year ago, Chicago's O'Hare International Airport experienced a UFO event that made national and international headlines. What I saw in the Arizona sky goes beyond conventional explanation. When it comes to events of this nature that are completely unresolved, we deserve more openness in government, especially our own.
Listen, you bastards.
Now,
tell them about it, Fife.
I read that to say we just did a pretty good job of explaining a pretty specific way this could have been solved. And I just find it very fascinating that a government official who has more to lose than gain, who is a former pilot and Air Force officer, put out this impassioned of a response to that official response.
Yeah.
And so thoroughly doubts that is or could have possibly been what they saw.
A man saw an apparition and he's fucking pissed about it.
He's gonna let you know. Hey, we fucking love y'all. Thanks for supporting the show. Thanks for listening to the show. Share it with your friends and tell your friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. We love y'all. We'll see you next week.
Say, you all didn't happen to do a bunch of drugs, did you?